after or early next week after the completion of all the sessions today. We'll have those available if you'd like to revisit anything or forward to those that may not have been able to attend. We also have the audience muted right now, and we'll handle Q&A just in the Skype window if you can type your questions there, and then after Mark wraps up here, we'll unmute the audience and be able to take live Q&A over the phone as well. So with that, Mark, I'll turn it over to you and we can get started.
Thanks, Adam. Hi, everyone. I'm Mark Osson. I'm one of the architects with Microsoft Center of Excellence, and one of the things we focus on actually is CSP. So the session that I'm about to present to you is one that we normally would present over maybe a day. So we're really trying to cram hybrid into a short window here, hybrid IaaS. But I know if you've been with us all day long, which I see from the names many of you have, you know that this is ending up like some really weird Twitch channel. So if you want to ignore my face, by all means, feel free to do that. And if you're listening live, thanks for sticking around this long. I know it's quitting time here on the East Coast. And as you can see behind me, I'll take advantage of my weird Twitch feed here. I'm actually in the Cincinnati office, which is themed after the show WKRP in Cincinnati, believe it or not. There's not a lot of shows about Cincinnati, so we glom onto the ones we have. So you'll see pictures of various people from that show behind me. And if you know what both Twitch are and WKRP in the same voice, you're well-rounded in our world. So congratulations. Also, I'll point out, as Adam said, that Keith Hill, who's a coworker of mine and has been at Microsoft for eons and eons, he's a seasoned veteran. He's actually online too, and he'll actually try to answer your IMs so that I don't have to stop. So with that, let me go ahead and get started. But we will try to break at the end for a little Q&A. So first thing I want to do is just let you know what we're going to try and cover, which is subscriptions, Azure hybrid networking, and then hybrid IaaS itself. And basically how those things are affected by CSP, or how they may be a little different in CSP than they would be in regular Azure. So since I'm focused here on infrastructure as a service, I just wanted to kind of start with this slide and talk a little bit about the fact that this is kind of the most complicated topic in a lot of ways, because IaaS, and especially hybrid IaaS, is really the Legos of the Azure world, right, of cloud. So this notion that, at least when I was a kid, Legos were kind of all rectangular and you had to build your own things out of them, is especially true for IaaS, right? You bring the content that you want to create, you put it up there and you get it going. But also in the modern Lego world, you can buy things that look like something. So you could buy a little Darth Vader Lego, and that would be a hard thing for me to have created years ago. But in the IaaS world, there's all kinds of VMs that you can grab that are basically already configured for you. So it's really figuring out the pieces that are going to fit best together. And that's going to be your burden as a CSP partner to kind of figure out all that, because it's not an easy task in some situations. So let's start with the notion of subscriptions. So I know Iran talked about this a little bit this morning, and is everybody hearing me all right?
Yeah, you sound great, Mark.
Okay, great. Sorry, just had a fear there that I was just talking to myself again. Anyway, so I wanted to talk a little bit about subscriptions. Like I said, Iran talked about this a little bit in the Azure AD stuff, but what's different here is you've got two ways to look at the world, or maybe kind of a blend of those. So one of the first things that you'll need to decide as a kind of a CSP partner is, what model do you intend to provide to your customers? So that's going to be anywhere from a completely hands-off approach, customer managed, or not customer managed, you managed, to hands-on approach. So we have some of our partners who basically will obscure the fact that Azure is even a part of the equation to their tenants, right? So they'll provide a service, lock it down, and the tenants consume it without really knowing where it is. And that's kind of the beauty of Azure too, right? You don't have to know where things are to make things happen that way. So that's kind of the one end, and that's where I would consider that heavily CSP managed, right? Customers unaware of where they're at. To this other side where the customer gets control over the Azure portal themselves. They can go and spit up new VMs if they want. They can go out there, try things, break things, call you for support, and then you'll call me. or someone along those lines. So it's really understanding what you're comfortable with as a company, kind of where your muscle's been built up historically, will guide you into which of these two models is going to make the most sense for you. So subscriptions here are managed by you, and this is kind of what you are probably imagining if you've not seen this before, right? So I've got a couple of customers, and all of their resources are basically down in those buckets. And early on, that's probably fine. In the very beginning, I think that's the pace and maybe a cadence that you'd want to start your POCs with. But I'd encourage you to start thinking about other ways to manage your subscription, right? So CSP managed subscriptions can come in a couple of different flavors. So think about the different approaches. Like if I break things down by department, for example, so HR's got their own subscription, marketing, finance. They're all going to have their own prod, their non-prod, and there's going to be upsides and downsides to kind of each of these three. So, for a department view, I might have a lower cost for ExpressRoute because I can, use the same circuits. I've got some simplified management, but on the other hand, I've got like a lot of RBAC to deal with.
Hey, Mark, one question. Sorry, just to hop in here. I don't think the deck is advancing, and so I'm not sure what's coming up there, but we're still looking at the title slide, just FYI.
Oh, heavens. All right, let's fix that. Tell me if there's any improvement.
Not just yet. I don't know. Are you the presenter right now? Or you may need to take over. I'm not sure what the issue is.
Yeah, every time I advance it, it's saying I'm viewing it privately. That's interesting.
Yeah, I think if you click the take over as presenter option, it may solve that issue.
Which I don't yet have.
See. You see it on the top up there?
No, I don't. I know where to look. This is a deck I uploaded just before. Is there another one that's in the session? No, just the one.
Here, let me take over, Mark, and then I'll try and give it back to you maybe. See
okay,
if that does
let's try that.
All right.
Taking over as presenter.
There we go. I think that did it.
Oh, now we're cooking with fuel. Okay.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks for calling that out. Otherwise, you're having trouble envisioning what I was talking about. So, when I said you're imagining this subscription model, that's what you were hopefully that's what you should have been imagining. Anyway, so as I was saying, there's a couple of different models there that you might try to break down with. Like one is per department, one is per environment. So dev resources all get their own subscription. QA, right, production, all in their own subscriptions. You can also do it by application. And the point of this is each one of these is going to have their own set of challenges. There's going to be pros and cons. And the bottom line is that the more subscriptions that you have per customer, the more complexity you're going to add. So, there's going to be things that might happen where, you purchased circuits that are basically arbitrary rather than understanding what the bandwidth needs are because you've broken that up in a kind of an arbitrary way architecturally. Multiple IP address space allocations and routing and all of that. And of course, if you've got your own stack of monitoring and AV solutions and things like that, they're all going to need to be duplicated for all those subscriptions. So really, there's a lot to think about here in how you want to take over and manage those subscriptions. And it may not be the same per customer. These are all just things to kind of think about at the high level. So just want you to start thinking about that as we dive into the actual resources themselves. All right, so let us jump into Azure Hybrid. And as you know, there's loads and loads of networks out there, right? Got one of the largest networks in the whole world to connect all these things. But what it ultimately is going to come down to for the tenants is they're going to connect in one of two overarching ways, which is cloud only or cross-prem. And cloud only is relatively straightforward and easy to get your head around, right? Which is, think of a born in the cloud company. They only ever put assets up in the cloud, so they don't have anything to deal with on-prem. So there'll be some of that, and we do see that occasionally. There's other companies who are maybe small and medium businesses in particular that are going to try to migrate wholesale in there, right? The lift and shift strategy. So moving that stuff up and then leaving it there and not having anything back on-prem. And that's easy, right? If that's the case and that's what they want to do, that's not difficult at all. So what we want to talk about for the next couple of minutes is this notion of cross-prem and the different ways that you can get cross-prem going, and maybe which one will make the most sense in a particular situation. So the beauty of Azure Virtual Networks, right, is this notion of BYON, right? You're bringing your own networks, your own address space, and your tenants can all have 10.1.1, everywhere if that's the case, and every tenant can do the same thing because the SDN is going to take care of all that for us. So that's great. You can create subnets, with your own private and public addresses, bring your own DNS or use our DNS, manage things through network securities and ACLs and all that. But ultimately, it's going to come down to basically these three choices. So is it going to be an internet connection, a point to a site, or a site to site? And how you're going to make that determination is going to be, well, basically who's using it. So at the end of the day, consumers are really the only ones who are going to be using internet connectivity for the most part, right? So I want to access something over the public IP, leave DNS resolution to the cloud and connect from anywhere. And that's really for the consumption of the services by and large. Moving down from there, right, you've got secure point to site, which we'll talk about each of these in a little more detail, but that's really, it's either dev focused or POC focused remote sites. Those are where we see those being used. They're quick and easy and for those environments. And then of course at the higher end is secure site to site, where you want to bring in a full permanent connection that's stable and has all kinds of awesome options. So what's different from regular Azure to CSP is kind of this notion of whether or not your tenants, your customers, are going to be connecting to Azure directly or connecting to Azure via you. So there's a connect through model or a connect to model. And there's a couple ways to kind of figure out how that's going to behave best in your world. So the first one is, well, let's look at connect through. So if you are in the business of hosting customers' solutions and workloads today, and customers already have a pipe into you, this might be a good solution, right? So that means that the customer is only ever going to connect to you, and then from there, use your site-to-site network or ExpressRoute to get into Azure and access AAD and the IaaS resources that are there. So this is a model generally used by folks that already have connections to their, or customers have connections into them, and they already have assets on site, or in their data center, I should say. Now, if you don't have a data center, or your customer isn't going to have anything in your network, then maybe it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for that to happen, in which case this is just more of a traditional Azure customer who's connecting directly to Azure via their own site-to-site VPN, and you're not in the picture, so to speak. So those are two things to consider, again, in what sort of business have you been running, and like I said, we see people from across the board doing both options. But basically, once you've decided that you're going to connect either your network or their network to Azure, it's going to come down to whether you want to do that over the public interwebs or whether you're going to do that securely via a direct line. So for point-to-site VPN connectivity, just remember, this is the reason we use this in POCs in those situations. Is it's quick, it's easy to use, you can do it from anywhere, you don't need to install anything. And it's, like I said, it's good for those quick instantiations where we need to get up and running, or where we've just got a couple of people out at a remote site somewhere that need to connect in. Beyond that is the site-to-site. So this is where you've either got a hardware VPN or something like a Windows RS server to make that connection for you. So you're effectively extending the entire premises up to the cloud in a secure manner. And this might be an on-ramp for, say, the migration of services. Like I said, if we were going to do a lift and shift, or like the BCDR session that you just attended, right? Those sorts of on-ramps are appropriate for this. And it's also when you have a monitoring stack or an AV stack or whatever that you're running locally that you want to push out to, or manage, I should say, the assets that are up in the cloud. And then the last one I want to talk about is ExpressRoute. And like I said, all these are really big topics. I know I'm just kind of cresting the top of the wave here, but ExpressRoute is where you're connecting to Microsoft's cloud without the use of the public internet, right? So you get an MPLS connection through one of our partners that's going to connect you basically directly into Azure. And there's a couple things to remember at a high level about ExpressRoute, at least today, and that's it's capped at 10 circuits per subscription, which seems like a lot, but we'll start to talk about how you divide up your resource groups, and if you're not careful in how you do that, this could potentially be something that you would get bit by later. And also, like, the maximum number of routes for Azure private peering within ExpressRoute is 4,000 by default, and then there's kind of a premium version of ExpressRoute that'll take you to 10,000. So there's lots of big gun value there. With the premium version, you also get the ability to increase the number of VNet links that you have, and those kind of increase as the circuit sizes increase. So yeah, I'll just leave it there. As I said, there's a lot of data here that is likely to change over time. So if you're watching this down the road, all this data, I'm going to encourage you to go in and re-verify off of whatever's currently on the web, because we're always expanding. Okay, so let's spend a little bit time talking about hybrid IaaS, and this is really where I wanted to focus kind of the rest of our session. And I'll start here with just probably everyone has seen this slide or some version of it. And this is what I like to refer to as the pizza as a service slide, because when I'm explaining this to non-technical people, I find that pizza is a more readily accessible analogy than on-prem versus IaaS services. So you can think of the spectrum here of on-prem being you're basically taking flour and water and making your own dough, putting all the ingredients on it, dropping it into an oven that you own, right, cooking it up, and then eating at a table that you have. Whereas infrastructure as a service is more of I'm going to stop at my local grocery store, pick up a pizza that's pre-built, and then just throw it in my own oven, cook it, and then eat it at my own table. Platform as a service is having your local pizza delivery company bring it to you hot, and all you need is a table, chairs, and napkins. And then, of course, at the far end of that spectrum would be software as a service, where you're just going to the local pizza restaurant and consuming everything there. So again, I'd encourage you to really spend some time thinking about, if you haven't already, what your model is. Where do you fit? Because here, the blue boxes there indicate what you manage, but who's you in this case, right? There's you, the service provider, and then there's you, the tenant. So when you're talking to your customers, how much of that blue are you going to block off for your own uses? Because that's where you're adding value, right? That's kind of your goal there. So again, something to think about, because I think you're really going to fall into the somewhere between, take a pizza home and bake it, and delivery. Most of you are probably not going to do full on like a software as a service version. So I think it's a good thing to start thinking about if you haven't already. And of course, the core Lego in all of this is VMs, and this is really the heart and soul of everything that we do. Like when Keith and I go out and talk to partners, pretty much everything that we're engaged in is around virtual machines, because we're focused on that IaaS space. So when we look at that, the first thing that you need to do is start to understand the workloads that you're either trying to replace, migrate, or simply instantiate anew is going to be around the sizing and tiers of those VMs. So considerations like number of CPUs, how much memory is allocated to a particular virtual machine, whether or not the machine, you need local storage, IOPS, disk size, bandwidth, all that sort of thing needs to come into play. So if you taken our Azure exam, you know that there's a lot of questions around VM size, and it quickly, well, I won't say the questions get dated, but the number of options has increased dramatically over time. So at this point, I really don't have any hopes of trying to remember every particular offering in the sizes, but I do like to just keep them separate. And if you know the difference between A, D, DV2, and G, that's a good start, because from there it's just kind of numerically increasing with size. So at the low end of the scale, you've got our A machines, which are the high value machines, right? Those are the cheap ones. And then we had the D machines were the first ones with SSD storage and faster CPUs. And then over time, we introduced a new family of D machines, I should say, that had faster CPUs, 35% faster than the Ds. So that's DV2s. And then, of course, there's the G series, right? The fabled Godzilla series. And that's without breaking them down into whether or not they're DSV2 or GS, right? Because there's fast storage that you can associate with all that as well. And then coming down the road, we'll have our N series too, which we've announced. So those are going to have GPU-enabled virtual machines. So they're going to have NVIDIA cards in there for things like remote visualization, compute-intense stuff, RDMA. And depending on when you watch this, that may already be available to you. But it isn't as of the recording. I checked this morning. So here, I'm just going to throw these up for just a moment and let you refer to them back in the recording if you're curious. But the better reference absolutely is to go out to Azure and look at this in real time, either through the portal itself or from our documentation. But you can see here, there's kind of a tremendous amount of options that are out there that you can choose from. So the notion that you can find something to fit what you're trying to do exactly is, I think, better over time than it had been before, certainly. And there's everything in here from more or less free to the big G series are like almost $8,000 a month retail. So there's a wide range of power requirements that you can accommodate there. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about availability sets. Again, here nothing specific to CSP, but just as a primer, let's cover off on that. So basically, in order to provide redundancy to your application, we recommend that you have at least 2 virtual machines, and the way that you're going to associate them with one another would be in the form of an availability set. And what this does is it makes sure that whether something planned or unplanned happens, you're still up. So the only way that you can meet the vaunted 99.95% SLA is to have an availability set with at least 2 VMs in it. There's also 2 other things that you're going to get as an aspect of this. One of them is the update domain, and the other is the fault domain. And I'll try and walk through VM creation if we have time to kind of show off all these things towards the end if you haven't seen them before. But basically, an update domain is all the virtual machines that are in the same update domain will be restarted at the same time during planned maintenance. So Azure is never going to restart more than one update domain at the same time. And that should keep you from having any issues caused by our updates. So you can have anywhere between 1 and 20 update domains as you go forward. And the other is a fault domain, which is more of a physical thing. So there's up to 3 of those, and those are VMs that are sharing a common power source or a physical network switch. So those, that's a rack goes down or a Tor goes down. All the machines associated with that are going to be in the same fault domain. So spreading out across multiple fault domains, across multiple update domains, and having an availability set that spans that is really the goal that you should be shooting for. Sorry, had an animation there I forgot about. And here's just another way of looking at that same thing. So availability sets spanning across fault domains there, as you can see in blue. So those are machines that are sitting in separate physical racks, so that when bad stuff happens, which it hopefully never does, but if it does, you're covered it to the best of your abilities. Okay, so the virtual machine gallery items. So when you go off to create a virtual machine in Azure, it's awfully easy. You basically pick which operating system you want to run, and you're almost up and running at that point. And the way that you do that is through the use of the virtual machine gallery. And you can see a screenshot I took there a couple days ago. Just we kind of throw up different ones that we'll recommend at any given time. So this may vary depending on who's up there today. But the idea is that if I want to install Visual Studio, I basically just pick Visual Studio. I fill in a couple of questions, and then out pops a VM that has Visual Studio already on it. The same thing goes for WordPress or Citrix or CoreOS or whatever it is that you're choosing there. And I looked this morning. There were 3,814 different items in Marketplace. So that's a kind of a tremendous amount of stuff to choose from. Granted, not all of that's going to be virtual machines. Some of that would be other things like BI stuff or ML, things like that. Everybody falls in that general marketplace. But again, there's just an awesome amount of stuff that's there. The part that's interesting for you guys as CSP is that you're currently limited to bring your own license or free. So if the VM image isn't free or a BYOL, you won't be able to take advantage of it. That's something that we're hoping to get resolved relatively quickly. Our goal is to match public Azure, in every way that makes sense, and this is certainly one of them. But yeah, at the moment, as long as you have the ability to bring your own license, you can take care of that. The other thing that you can do is you can create your own image, right? So you've got a stack of stuff that you want to be able to implement over and over again across your customers. So let's say that was, your monitoring, and asset stuff. Create that VM, and then either build it in Azure or upload it to Azure, and then from there you can take advantage of it. So in the old portal, you could actually see that here in the UI. That's not the case, at least not at the moment. But you can access that over PowerShell, so that would be the preferred way to do that. So you create your own images, upload them via PowerShell, and then you can take advantage of them in your movements going forward, particularly through your ARM templates, which, if you've been around all day, you know how awesome and valuable those are. And then there's VM extensions, right? So VM extensions let you bring things like APM custom scripts, Trend Micro's deep security agents, one of them, HPE Defender, anti-malware, PowerShell desired state config, Chef, all that kind of stuff is available to you as what we call curated extensions. So you can pick these things those are all things on the Windows side. Like on the Linux side, there's Docker, which eventually, of course, we'll come over as well. So you take those and basically add them to your VM. Now, here again, CSP is a little different than mainstream Azure, where you're not going to be able to see the extensions in the public portal. So you're going to do this again via PowerShell, but it's available to you. So make sure that you take advantage of that. It certainly makes your ability to manage things a whole lot easier if you're a Chef environment, or DSC or whoever. Okay, so I know this has been covered off a little bit, but if you're only joining for this session, it's worth repeating here that we're now in IaaS v2, which is based on Azure Resource Manager, so the ARM version of Azure, which is the new portal, which is now the portal. But if you've been around a while before, you might have run into the older portal, which was service management. So everything that CSP uses is based on ARM, and only ARM applies to it. So I think it's an important thing to keep in mind as you go forward. Of course, there's tons of things that ARM provides from a technical perspective that we need and rely on. AOBO and the fact that we're logging all this stuff is enabled, technically speaking, because we're on ARM. But as you go out and look for stuff, also remember that there's two sets of articles probably for the thing that you're trying to do. And not a week goes by where someone doesn't ask me why these steps aren't working, and having looked at the document, I realize that it's not applying to ARM, it's applying to the Service Manager, the older version of the portal. So, and I get caught up on that too. Our stuff actually is pretty good right now. So if you go out to the Microsoft docs, we've done a very good job of labeling which version it's for. But if you're just browsing the web at large and you find an article, they may not be as clear. So just keep that in mind. So we're dealing here specifically with ARM. So resource manager, tagging, RBAC, all that stuff is what we need in order to make CSP work. And so that's the world that you will live in, save of course for the Azure Active Directory stuff, which will be in the old portal. So here's just a quick diagram too for reference on basically the difference between deploying things in Classic and in Resource Manager. And whoops, don't want to go quite that far. The big difference here is the fact that you can do this, in parallel. They're idempotent. There's a lot of tremendous advantages that we'll have from the one that was just from using the V2 version of this model. Okay, sorry. Okay, and I know, again, earlier, looking back at some of the stuff on the ARM session, if you hadn't seen that, Azure Resource Manager and templates, that's a fantastic thing to think about. But one of the foundations there is this notion of resource groups. And so resource groups are something that you're going to have to, again, kind of contend with probably on a per tenant basis, because not the same model may not apply for everybody. And this is really a situation where you're going to have to do a lot of design work up front and make good choices for your tenants as to which designs are going to make the most sense, right? So I've got some tenants that are, have a relatively simple configuration like you see at the top there, where there's a single resource group. Everything's combined in their storage accounts, front end, back end, all that's grouped into one spot. And then I have other tenants or companies with tenants that are spread across, multiple Azure regions. So, we got front end VMs in Asia, in the US, and in Europe, and storage accounts matching all that, and, maybe a bunch of web heads on one side where there's more use, right? This is all just how you design these resource groups is completely up to you, and it'll probably take some reading, some thoughtful design, and some trial by error before you get all that down the way you want it. But just know that those are options that are available. So what are the improvements in particular to Azure virtual machines in V2? So the first one, of course, is the fact that they're based on ARM. They can be deployed at massive scale and in parallel. So that's the first biggie. As I mentioned before, when you set up your availability sets, you can have up to 3 fault domains. So you're ensuring against physical issue there. Custom URLs for custom scripts in those VM extensions that we talked about just a second ago. And SSH2 format for the Linux VMs. If there's anything else, no, I think that's all I wanted to cover there. And then this is really just highlighting, again, for clarity, once you're using ARM-based services and you have resource group management, you get this ability to do centralized auditing of all your operations. You've got a consistent access control that you can implement everywhere, and you've got simple tagging and grouping of resources. So one of the questions we'll often get when we start down this path with our partners, and I don't remember seeing it in the earlier session, though I may have missed it, was is 15 tags really enough? Right, so every resource group can have up to 15 tags, or a particular asset can have up to 15 tags. And the answer to that is yes, 15 actually is enough, because if it doesn't occur to you, like if you feel like you need more than 15, basically what we suggest people do is simply comma delimit them or semicolon delimit the values. So you've got this name and value, and they hold quite long strings. So you can have dozens of delimited values inside of a particular tag that you could pull out programmatically and break back up. So if 15 really isn't enough, don't sweat it too much. There's ways around that. And the other thing around resource group, or around RBAC and users, which I'll show you when we get into the portal too, is again this notion that you're in control of the tenant's environment in a way that doesn't make sense in normal Azure. So if you create you go in and create a tenant environment and then create a couple of virtual machines in there, you're the only one who can see them. The tenant can't see them, right? So the tenant may end up with the bill for them, and that may or may not be what you're looking to do, but the tenant can't actually see them until you give them those rights, right? So our RBAC is really critical there, and you'll see that in the portal. There's actually a way that you'll visualize AOBO doing admin on behalf of someone. It's pretty obvious to see there. But yeah, what isn't obvious necessarily to first-time CSP users is that, oh gosh, I created that asset and no one can see it. And that's just because RBAC is working the way it ought to. Okay, virtual machine storage. So there was a couple things here I wanted to call out, although I don't think any of it was particular to CSP. But just know that when you're creating your virtual machine, you've got a computer instance that's got persistent and temporary storage. Make sure that you're careful what you put on your temporary storage, because that ends up moving to another location. You'll lose all that. It happens, unfortunately, pretty regularly, and it's just something that people need to understand and prepare for. It's not unprecedented. It's well documented, but it still happens. Of course, VMs are required to have a storage account, and at the moment we're currently supporting fixed VHD, which implies Gen 1. So that is the case. We don't support Gen 2 in Azure at the moment. So fixed VHD format in support of Gen 1 VMs. A couple other things just around storage accounts in general. Each subscription can have 100 storage accounts, and each storage account can have up to 500 terabytes. So that's a considerable amount per subscription. I just need to consider how you break that up. And in terms of how you break it up, completely up to you. Whether you have that as 500 terabytes of blobs or some combination of blobs, tables, queues, messages, whatever, none of that really matters as long as you're just below the 500 terabyte threshold. So, do your homework, understand what you're trying to get out of that. Also, remember that IOPS are going to vary pretty greatly depending on what you're doing. So, the bottom of the line, cheap, basic tier VM is going to give you 300 IOPS, whereas like a P30 disk is going to give you 5,000. Right. So there's a trick here in being good stewards for your tenants and making sure that you're balancing cost and performance, because it's easy in Azure to grab something very performant that is going to do the thing, but the trick is making sure that you're giving it just enough so that you're not running up spend unnecessarily. Okay, so again, this goes back to the notion that we had two ways in which Azure operated, and we're living in the resource group model. So just remember that everything CSP does is going to be in the resource group placement using ARM. It's all new portal stuff. And I think I've mentioned it before, so I don't want to dwell on it unnecessarily there. Okay, yeah, so let me pause here and see if my Azure subscription has logged me out or not, and I'll switch over to that. Looks like it's still going. Okay. Let me present this, and I just want to kind of walk through some of those topics so that you can see them outside of a slide deck and understand a little better what we're talking about. And it tells me that it's going through, so I'm going to give it just a second here and then proceed. Please holler if it's not coming through. So this is the CSP portal, which it looks more or less just like regular Azure, with one probably big difference. So the quick and easy way to see whether or not you're actually doing admin on behalf of is just to click on your profile there, and you'll see that under directory you have two items listed, right? So here I'm logged in as MCS test 10 or MCS 10 AZ test, doing admin on behalf of Tenant Gosson. So that's and you can see it kind of there as a double stack too, but it shows up there. So first and easiest way to tell if that's working is there. The other thing I mentioned was this notion that when you first create resources, right, the resources aren't necessarily available to the tenant because you haven't made them available. So what I ended up having here are a couple of VMs. One's called Visible Ubuntu and the other's called Mystery Ubuntu. And the Mystery Ubuntu, as you can see from the users here, it's available to subscription admins and to the foreign principal, which is me, but no one else. And that's how the VM or the resources are going to be created by default. So that's the default behavior. And well, I'll grab another one here in just a second. The other thing I wanted to show you is just kind of walking through the whole process of VM creation. If you have, I'm not sure tabs is the right word, but basically if you have a bunch of things running in Azure, Azure will give you them in this dropdown, which is awfully handy. So I'm going to go back and go over a virtual machine creation. See if this is going to, yeah, looks like it's going to load. And this just saved me hopefully a couple steps in trying to build all this out for you guys. This was a /db because I thought that sounded cool. And I'm probably about to make Azure cry, because usually when I switch into these, the refresh on this goes a little wonky, and oh no, it didn't. That's awesome. Yeah, sometimes if you have a bunch of tabs open like I did, this last tab, if there's values that you filled in, they don't always cache out right, and you'll get the crying cloud logo, which is always fun to see. But anyway, so let's roll back since this is working. So the first thing I did was go out and create a new virtual machine, or that's what I picked. And then you see here I've got the real gallery. So this is the gallery in real time, whoever happens to be loading here at the moment. So there's the /db that I grabbed earlier, and Citrix and all that. And these are basically broken out by function, so you can expand on them and read more about what they do and group them by particular function. Also, you can see here that bring your own license is enabled on this VM. So this is one of the VM images that we can use in CSP. They're all going to be either free, like I said, or BYOL. You should not have any choice down here, right? The resource manager is the only option for you guys, so that's an easy thing to pick. And then from here, it's really just going out and configuring the basics for each of these VMs. So I can tell that right away that this was a Linux VM because it's got an SSH key. It's a nice clue there. So if I were to go and add this to my new resource group that I created just this morning for this purpose. And the next thing it's going to do is ask me for size. And this is a question we'll actually get quite a bit, is if I'm letting my tenants go out there and pick their own VM stuff, will they see the prices? And there's your answer. No, they won't. All right, so they get this, for pricing information, please contact your reseller, which hopefully is the behavior you want. Now, certainly an inquisitive one could go out and look at the public pricing. That's not a secret anywhere. And again, what you guys charge is completely up to you because you're adding value to your services. But they can't see the basic price here or any of that. So another nice thing that this has is that you can see that it's recommended an A4 and a D4, and that's because /db, the people who made the template, thought these were appropriately sized VMs. Doesn't mean you have to choose them. You can underpower, overpower, all you like. But it is nice that it's at least giving you the option. And there you can see the loads and loads. You can imagine all the various configurations that are there. So I'll just grab one of these. Whoops. Every time I think Azure's too slow, I'm like, I got to be the only person on there, right? What else could it be doing? Okay, so here's where we get to start making the kind of the more important decisions. So you can see there that because of the VM type, I've already been put on premium storage. And every time, as you look down here, the red asterisks are the data that's required. And if it's new information, it'll put the word new next to it. So that's nice to know that this storage account is a new storage account. And maybe I don't want that, right? I can spot that very easily and realize that actually I want to use an existing storage account that I already had. Oh, but the one that I had wasn't premium, so I'll leave that be. Same thing with virtual network, right? If you've got a virtual network out there that you want to attach to, you can grab those. And you can see that it's creating a new one for me here on the 10.3 address space. Change all this to your heart's content. It's going to grab a public IP. It's creating a new network security group. So basically all this stuff is coming in new. The VM extensions, as I mentioned before, are going to not be visible to you here, so don't panic when you see that. You can click on add an extension, it won't get you anywhere. These are things that need to be programmatically done. So honestly, the first few times that you use Azure, I expect that you would use the portal, but once you understand the value that Mike was talking about earlier and using ARM templates, you don't want to use the portal after that because it's really highly inefficient. So yeah, and there's the last thing I want to show you is availability sets. There it is. All right, so I'll create a quick availability set there. So there you can see the number of update domains that I want to have and how many vault domains. That's just where you set it. And from there you should be good. And then at this point, we're down to the summary, so we're in good shape there. And the last step, of course, is buy. Of course, I'll check my pockets, but I don't have a /DB license handy, so I'll create that and I'll go dig it up later. Okay, so anyway, that was just a quick look at how that process walks through in terms of creating a new virtual machine, and all the assets that go with it around storage, networking and all that stuff. You can see it here. It's easy to get a handle on the first couple of times, and then again, my advice is don't go back to the portal after that. Really wean yourself as quickly as you can onto an ARM template, PowerShell-based deployment. You're going to be a lot better off. You're going to be happier. And of course, if you go out to any of the get rid of that. If you go out to GitHub, all the templates that are out there, right? Everything that we reference at this point is pretty much based on that. Let me go back to. I lost my deck. Considering it's 10 of 6 here at the office, I can't blame anyone else for taking up the network, can I? That was just me. Okay, so just had another couple slides here, and then we can take Q&A. So I guess one of the things I want you to walk away thinking about here is your role as consultants, right, and as trusted advisors is really what's important. Good stewardship of your account and growing that's all going to be done through understanding the restrictions that are in place and then creating solutions to take the best advantage of what's out there. So obviously cost is going to be the biggest one. So size, number of VMs. Does it make more sense to have 3 little ones than 2 medium size or 1 large, right? That's all basically calculations that you're going to want to do, and you'll get better at it over time. Storage requirements, obviously VPN, and then networking is a whole nother kettle of fish there. So deciding on your name resolution, whether they're owning that or you're owning that or Azure's owning that, virtual network overlay, the number of persistent IPs that are required, all that kind of stuff. And then kind of most importantly are the limits. So make sure that you understand, what limits are Some limits you'll see online, like the number of public IPs that you can assign to um, uh, Azure Load Balancer was a request I got from a partner recently. And the default is 5, and then if you look on the tables in Azure, it says call support after that, and then support can raise it up beyond that to 20. So understanding kind of what all those are is going to take some time, because probably all your clients aren't using the exact same sort of stuff, and you're going to find that the first couple they're all going to be weird and different and involve growing pains. So just understand that all that's happening, that VMs aren't load balanced by default. Understand that there's limits to how many VMs can be on a VNet. All that sort of stuff is going to be where you guys make a name for yourself. Please your clients in making the right choices and making smart choices. So obviously cost is the big one that I would ask you to consider there. And to the credit of our exam, that is one of the things that actually drills down on, is making sure that you're making smart choices in terms of cost. And then understanding what the cost drivers are, and also understanding what the client's really trying to solve. I guess that's consultancy 101. But so some considerations just to think about in the largest sense possible, and that is consumption versus traditional IT investment. That math is not going to play out well here, right? The shift to a consumption-based model can be challenging, right? The current IT spending doesn't consider that, right? So make sure that you're thinking about it in terms of cloud. If there's a way to bring the machine down when it's not being used, all that stuff will save you money. Those are important things to consider. Also remember that IaaS migration isn't always going to be a one-to-one, right? I mean, it's nice to take a product like ASR and push that up there, but if you're doing other things, it's very easy to over-purchase, your on-prem solution because you need it for future growth, but that's not, the model here. So anyway, make sure that you're doing a compelling and deep review of the infrastructure that's out there, and make sure that you're setting the correct expectations for the footprint that you want to put in Azure. Consumption budgeting requires a shift in thinking, right? I mean, that's the whole world that we all are living in. So start thinking about understanding utilization, scaling, blowing up when you need to blow up, compressing down, or like I said, turning off if that's appropriate. Take advantage of the elasticity that the cloud provides. That's really the key part of that transition, because if you do that, I think that's one of the keys to being successful, right? Is making sure that it's small when it needs to be small, and then it scales out when it needs to scale out. But with that, I guess we've got just about 5 minutes left. So I don't know if Keith has been whacking down your questions. I've been trying to ignore the IM window, which is like a dog and a squirrel. Just trying not to look at that. But yeah, anyway, if we want to unmute folks, if they have any questions, or if you just want to throw them in the IM if you're shy, I understand. And if you're still with us on the East Coast, good for you. Hopefully I got the WKRP and Cincinnati theme stuck in someone's head.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Yeah, I just unmuted the audience, so if anyone has questions here, please let us know.
Stunned silence. Okay, well, I guess, if people do have questions later, like I said, a lot of this I know was very general. I tried to call out things that were CSP specific, but Adam, I know you gave out our public URL a couple times, or the email alias that people can ask questions to. Be good to repeat it here for anybody. Is there, Keith, do you happen to know, is there an anticipated date for Gen 2 VM support? I have not seen that, but you're not the first to ask.
Yeah, I've not heard back on that. I know I've got another customer that's asking the same thing, so that's something we'll probably have to follow up with.
Yeah, I imagine that'll probably be you do run into it with ASR. ASR will actually convert your Gen 2s to Gen 1s, which is kind of awesome, but there you go. Yes, Mr. Burton's brain hurts after 7 hours, as well it should. Soon it will be time for beer or whatever refreshing thing you enjoy. Yeah, thanks, Adam. So yeah, there's the Azure CSP Accelerate. So if you do have any questions, feel free to reach out to that. This is the sort of things that we do on a daily basis. So it really does come down to what a particular tenant is trying to do, and then how that provider is going to handle it. There's a lot of variables there. So everybody always asks me, how does everybody else do it? But it's really a depends kind of question. So I guess with that, we've got a couple minutes left. We'll wind down the clock here, but otherwise it's the weekend for me now. So yes.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Mark. Dave, if you want to shoot that question over to the alias too, we'll try and follow up directly with the BG and get you an answer on the Gen 2 question. So we'll share whatever we can there. Perfect. Hey, thanks, Mark. Really appreciate you staying late in your day to do this. Thanks,
you got it, Adam.
Keith, as well. Hope you all have a great weekend. Take care.
Thanks, you too.